right, I'm here with Alex Sear, and we're here to break down Faith Kipyegon's extraordinary 1,500-meter world record set at the Prefontaine Classic over the weekend. And Alex, you can't help but compare it to Nike's Breaking4, which happened just 9 days before she ran at Pre. And we will get into unpacking all of that and offer up some hot takes as well. First question I'm going to ask you right off the top, and this is a spicy one, a tough one.
Shoot, I'm wearing my Faith Kipyegon I've Got Faith shirt. I'm ready for whatever you're going to throw my way.
You have even more faith now than you did before.
Yeah, my faith's just getting stronger.
Was her race at Pre more exciting and enjoyable and thrilling and impressive than Breaking4?
Yes. It was
Okay.
like, it was, because it was like a mirror image of Breaking4. Breaking4 was like all hype until she fell off pace, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
Whereas the Pre-Classic to me was the opposite. Yes, she got a standing O before the race. People acknowledged that she was there. Everyone's been like fanboying and fangirling over her since Breaking4, but she wasn't the only hot ticket of that meet. She was one of many, many world-class athletes. And so the day was not necessarily about Faith Kipyegon. Even the first few laps were somewhat modest. We'll get into pacing later. And it was kind of just low-key until it wasn't. And so the difference was you left the race feeling so elated and so excited about the performance, whereas Breaking4, you kind of left it feeling a little crestfallen. So I think all in all, the Pre-Classic was more exciting.
No matter what social media said after Breaking4, the mood in the stadium and certainly the mood in the press conference in Paris was a little sullen and one of a bit of disappointment. And then like kind of the marketing machine and the influencer machine kind of kicked into high gear, and everyone was like, "That was amazing," which it was amazing. It was a unofficial world record. It was an improvement, but I think the expectations were so ridiculously high. Like, I have to admit, I was drinking the Nike Kool-Aid. I believe that they knew something we didn't know, that she was going to somehow close a gap of, at least 5 or 6 seconds to get very close to sub 4. And of course that was not the case. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about this event, the 1,500 meters, and break it down here. I think the thing that jumps right out first off is that if you want to get into the nitty gritty and the kind of the science behind it and apply something called the World Athletics Tables, we'll spare our audience the cruelty of trying to explain how they come up with these tables, but they're a pretty accurate way of comparing different distances and different events across the board in track and field, and which event between Breaking4 and the pre-1,500 meter was a better performance.
It was almost the same. The same. So just to give people a little bit of a benchmark, 1,300 points. Okay. Stay with us in the abstract here. 1,300 points is very difficult to achieve. Only a handful of athletes have achieved 1,300, including, say, Usain Bolt. It's very, very rare. Okay. Kipyegon's 1,500 meter world record was given a 1,299. So almost a 1,300. And that ends up being her best performance ever compared to her Breaking4 time, or should I say times, because there are two times. The time that Nike claims that Faith Kipyegon ran, which is a time that began when she reacted to the gun, and then also the gun time, which is how runners are usually timed, is from the start of from the shot of the gun to the end of the race. Her gun time was 4:06.91. Her reaction time, or her full time minus reaction time, was 4:06.42. Both of those times gave her a 1,296 and 1,293. So all of this to say that on those tables, her performance at the Pre-Classic was a tiny bit better than Breaking4.
Yeah, and we should also say that a sub 4 requires 1,347 points. So, significantly more obviously, than what she's run thus far. So you can get a sense of like, in terms of like, if you want to use that kind of abstract point system, in terms of like the gap that still remains there. But ultimately, Breaking4 and this 1500 meter world record, pretty comparable, but you could say a slight improvement from Breaking4 to Prefontaine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a slight improvement. And if you compare Kipyegon's time to other standout performances from the pre-classic, because there were many, including Beatrice Chibet's 5,000 meter world record, her 1500 stands as much better, or ranks better, 1285 to 1299. And so just another indicator of how phenomenal that race was.
One thing I thought was really neat about Pre, that I think you wouldn't have this phenomenon without Breaking4 in advance of it. It's almost like Breaking4 was like, I don't know, I'm thinking about Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour, a 90s personal favorite of mine, Oasis, that are now doing this like weird reunion tour, the big cash grab around the world, and how there's this sort of like building hype around these big, phenomenal monocultural events. And in its own tiny way, Faith Kipyegon, thanks in part, in large part due to Nike and Breaking4, has maybe turned the corner into becoming a little bit of a monocultural event unto herself, at least in the world of athletics, where it's like, would there have been the hype at Pre for this event, for the 1500, if Breaking4 had not happened just like 9 days beforehand?
I don't think so. I mean, again, take the comparator of Faith Kipyegon and Chibet, and I'd say that athletically, they're very comparable. Two athletes at the top of their game looking to chase down their own world records or the world records. And Chibet did not get the welcome that Faith Kipyegon did. In fact, I don't think any athlete was cheered on as much as Faith Kipyegon before the 15. So say what you want about Breaking4. I do think that it propelled her into some type of running stardom. And we wondered that after the race, will this carry over? Will people think of Faith Kipyegon like they think of, say, Eliud Kipchoge or other legends of the sport? And I think it did something. I think people were dialed in for this 15.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed, I'm fairly certain, I might be wrong on this, but I'm fairly certain they flexed her event to the end of the day. I think when I looked at an earlier schedule, now you could go back in time and check this out and figure this out for yourself, but I'm fairly certain, going off of memory, that the women's 1500 was sort of in the middle of the schedule for the day at Prefontaine Classic. And then on race day, when they're broadcasting it live on NBC, it's moved to the very end. And it's like, it's the denouement, it's the capper. She's the headliner of the event. And it very much felt like a one-day music festival where like the biggest act was the last act, with all these other kind of like great performers hyping the whole thing up. Like you mentioned, Beatrice Chibet, she ran the 5,000 meter world record. That was like a total phenomenal performance as well.
First woman under 14 ever.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just like, it's like a magical day in track and field, right? But they move Faith Kipyegon to that kind of like headlining slot. And I wonder if Breaking4 didn't happen, if the event wouldn't have done that, or wouldn't have sort of keyed so much on it. I don't think they would have.
I don't think so either. It felt like the event of the meet, bar none, despite there being incredible other elite fields, including the men's mile. The men's mile was phenomenal. A couple guys under 346, and still, it was Kipyegon who stole the show. I feel like we should talk about the race itself, because I think she ran it better. I mean, it's funny to say, because it's like a race. Breaking4 was a race to make her pace it perfectly. And yet I think she paced the pre-classic better with just a single pacer and going at it old school, being in an actual race.
Yeah, I got the splits in front of me here. 60. Oh, wait a minute. This is Breaking4 splits. So I got the splits in front of me here. 61.9 for the first 400. 203.4 for 8 through 800. 304.7 through 1200. The final 200 meters she closed in 28.8, which interestingly enough, apparently was the exact same time that Beatrice Chibet closed the last 200 meters in the 5,000. So that's like,
Oof.
I know, like hats off to Beatrice Chibet. That's an incredible last 200.
Yeah.
But needless to say, the pacing was a much different strategy for this 15 than for Breaking 4. As a point of contrast, just offer you the stats for Breaking 4, which were like stats that were hard to come by at first and then like the day after, and then they finally got released. 60.2 for 400, 2 minutes 75 for 8, 301.84 for 1200, and then 406.42 for the close, or 406.91 if you are a conspiracy theorist or you don't like the running start that that Kipyegon took at Breaking 4. So two very different approaches to racing. I think obviously the 1500 meters more strategic, sort of getting more comfortable. She was in a small group. She was competing with two other women for the last couple of laps that kind of hung on with her until she decided it was go time with a couple hundred meters to go. And she also had a pacer for the first 800 meters in the 1500 meter race. Whereas obviously we know Breaking 4, she had 11 pacers. It was extremely choreographed and controlled, and they were focused entirely on hitting a split strategy and not just kind of feeling your way through the race.
I have a take on why I think Breaking 4 went that far south in the last lap after now watching Kipyegon run this 1500 at Pre. I think they had her go out too hard.
Right.
I think she went out too hard. I think I know that her better races, her mile world record, and now her 1500 world record were run with her keeping a lot in the tank for the last lap. If you contrast both races, she is 3 seconds apart from Breaking 4 to Pre. She crosses the 1200 meter mark in 301 high at Breaking 4, 304 high at Pre. And then that makes all the difference. Like, we saw what happened. So what people don't realize about Breaking 4 is that it's not that she was off from the start. 1200 meters into the race, I still thought she was going to do it.
Yeah.
She lost all of her ground in that last 400, which means she was trying a pace that was a bit too hard for her at the time. I think the pacing strategy was off. At Pre, she did it perfectly. She saved 3 seconds for herself and closed so much harder. So I don't know. Like, we talked about this in a previous podcast. After Breaking 4, there's a press conference, and the Nike specialists were pretty cagey about the pacing strategy. They didn't want to share it, didn't want to talk about it. I think it's because they realized that it was wrong.
They screwed up. Yeah. That they kind of maybe set her up to fail's the wrong word, because she still ran 406, which is phenomenal. But I think maybe in retrospect, they realized that, and this is like anybody else. This is like a recreational runner running a marathon and just kind of getting that first half pacing incorrect and then paying for it in the second half. It's a much more acute and specific and like just razor thin margin for the best, middle distance track runner in the world in Faith Kipyegon, right? So, but yeah, that 1.5 second difference in the opening 400 meters makes a huge difference, and it comes back to haunt you if you're just on the other side of what you're capable of handling. Another thing that's really interesting that I was trying to eyeball as I'm watching we were in Paris for Breaking 4, but didn't get out to Eugene to watch the Prefontaine Classic, sadly, and watching it on a TV instead. So I was wondering, and I was very curious to see what Nike was going to do and how they were going to outfit her for Pre, and if they were going to push the envelope or not in terms of technology. They did not appear to. So Breaking 4, here's the gear in Breaking 4 that was not present for the 1500 meter run. She was not wearing the TPEE speed suit, no headband, no arm or leg sleeves. Presumably she was not wearing the Nike Victory FK prototype spikes, although I don't know, but presumably she was not. because they've not been approved by World Athletics. And instead, she's wearing like a pretty conventional zip up Nike singlet and a pair of what looked like those kind of ribbed Aero Swift shorts. Like they're kind of like the tight shorts. Didn't have a watch on, just had a bracelet on that said Faith on it. And that was it. So she wasn't even so concerned about like aerodynamics as they were so obsessed with in Breaking4. So those were the items that were not on display. I thought it was interesting that she was not wearing the speed suit, not wearing the headband, and none of the other stuff, because when we were in Paris, I asked a Nike designer whether or not, they'd checked in with World Athletics in advance of releasing this stuff and using this stuff for Breaking4, and they got really cagey with me about it and kind of like, we're not here to talk about that today. We're not going to discuss that, which to me is kind of a way of saying, no, we didn't. And I think that stuff is super gray area. So they perhaps wisely just left it be. And then she ran just as well. I don't know what that says about all that gear. I don't know what it says also about the pacing strategy. I don't know what it says about all the aerodynamic research. I don't know what it says about the 11 pacers that they used for Breaking4, because they were also obviously not present. There was just one pacer for 800 meters, and then she just had good old-fashioned competition against her in the last couple of laps.
Yeah, I think right now it's Nike's R&D team that has something to answer, because after Breaking4, there was this like looming question that I didn't want to ask. No one wanted to ask. It almost felt it would have felt disrespectful to ask it at that time because the event was so heightened and there was so much pressure on Faith Kipyegon. But the elephant in the room, maybe the smaller of the two elephants in the room, the first one being that the tech doesn't work. The second one was, is it possible that she's just not that fit right now? Is it possible that she just doesn't quite have it? And a week passes, she throws down the 1500 meter world record. So then it's like, no, she's got it. She's got it. Maybe the tech is the issue. In fact, when you compare the tech, when you compare both races, it kind of feels like the tech was a bit of a non-factor.
Well, I mean, certainly not to like nitpick Breaking4 again. We've already done that in a previous podcast, but like, I think the expectation was you're going to see a big jump in that. Then there was going to be this huge discussion about all the technology that Nike threw at it and how perhaps that created the big jump in time. And that didn't happen. And then she rolls out a slightly, at least by the numbers, slightly better performance in the 1500 meter this past weekend with none of that tech that Nike presumably spent millions of dollars developing. So, yeah, I think I don't want to say the word damning, because I think that I still really want to see it all being put together. I think the bigger question is, and this is something that, Alex, your coach texted me about this, and a couple of other running nerds texted me about this in the immediate aftermath of Breaking4, was this sense that maybe Breaking4 was placed way too early in the event schedule for Kipyegon to have success this year. Because when you think about a miler, a middle distance runner, they like to work their way into a groove where they're peaking at the right moment. And that usually takes a couple of performances, a couple of races. And so I went back and took a quick look, and I was like, all right, in 2023, when she ran her mile world record in Monaco, she raced twice beforehand. She raced twice in June beforehand. She raced a 1500 meters, and then she raced a 5000 meters, and then she raced the mile in Monaco in July. So she was a little bit more primed to perform. And instead with this one, she had one race very early on, which you maybe don't even count in China in the spring. And then they just kind of threw her head first into the dark waters of Breaking4 off of, I'm sure a lot of training, but not a whole lot of racing or no racing. So instead I took a look at the Diamond League schedule for this year. And I know Breaking4 was not a Diamond League event, of course. But you think that maybe they could have used the Diamond League schedule to their advantage a little bit. We had a 1500 meter in Rome, June 6th. Just 6 days before Breaking4 was scheduled, there was a 1500 meter in Paris. There was a 1K race. There's a 1K race set for Monaco on July 9th. And then on July 19th, there's a women's mile in London, which I should note, Sifan Hassan has announced that she's going to be running that mile in London.
Oh boy, watch that happen.
Second fastest woman all time. So
I mean, I was crunching the numbers for the pre-classic, and a few of Kipyegon's runner-ups. So Welteji of Ethiopia and Jess Hull of Australia. Had you converted that 15 to a mile, they would have been dangerously close to her standing record.
Right, and it begs the question: like, would Breaking4 have been a better experience for Faith Kipyegon? Never mind for us as viewers, as fans of the sport. But it would have been a better racing experience for her if it would have been a race.
Yeah. I think so. What you're saying, though, for why not leverage the Diamond League a little bit more before trying Breaking4 is interesting. And I also wonder if for some reason Kipyegon wasn't interested in these June races, why not push Breaking4 to July or even August? Why have it on June 26th?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'll say this. There was a lot of reporting that has been left undone. You and I talked about this on the flight back from Paris. We had a long debrief on our 7-8 hour flight back. And one of the things you and I both discussed in quite a bit of detail was kind of the state of running media right now, and, of which we are a part, and how there are just not that many true blue journalists in the track and distance running world right now. And we got like virtually no real hard-nosed reporting out of Breaking4 or leading up to it. I have so many questions about Breaking4. There's so much palace intrigue with Nike. There are so many behind the scenes things that perhaps we'll never know. My questions include, was there a debate? Surely there was a debate about whether or not they should have gone with an all women's pacing group, and how they landed on 9 men and 2 women, beyond the obvious sort of like they wanted to hold the 11 pacers together as long as they could. Perhaps the optics was one of the reasons why they opted for including 2 women in the pacing group, but they obviously can't have 11 women in the pacing group because otherwise they would have to sub in and sub out women. Although I think that genuinely should have been something on the table. And it would have probably made for a really interesting event. Although it seems like Nike ultimately decided to go with like winning. They decided to go with performance over anything, right? So, which is kind of very Nike. That's sort of their ethos. Other questions I had were, like, why at this point in the season? Why is it sort of like airdropped right into effectively the early part of the track season, instead of, as you said, like mid-July, once she's warmed up with a few races? And I think maybe that's a bit of a miss on their part.
I wondered the same thing throughout the day, and especially after it didn't happen. It almost felt like she needed a bit more practice just to iron out the kinks, right? As a miler, that's what you do. And then about an hour after the race, I got this notification from Yahoo Finance letting me know that Nike had reported their, I think for them it's Q1 earnings.
No, it was their year-end report. It was because their fiscal end of year was May 31st, and their reporting date
was June. Okay, there we go. It was June 26th. And it went well for them. It was a good reporting. They gained, a little bit more than 20 billion in market cap on that day, which the market cap had gone quite a bit down. It had been a difficult year for Nike. There was a CEO change. It was maybe a tough 12 months.
Here's a snapshot. On June 25th, the day before Breaking4, Nike's stock price was $60.83. As of recording this July 7th, it's over $76. That's a 25% increase in the value of the company. And that happened virtually, it skyrocketed. It went up over 70 the day after Breaking4. And, a combination, I think, of the reporting, the earnings report was not good, by the way. They still are losing money and they're still not doing great. And the tariff thing has still totally screwed them up. But it was better than expected. And their last quarter, we're not a finance podcast, but like the last quarter was better than they thought it was going to be. So I think that calmed the nerves of investors. And then there's this like great afterglow of this event all over social media. And it's like, hey, Nike's doing cool stuff again. And then the stock price has just taken off and it's held pretty strong as well. So if nothing else, Breaking4, say it costs, I don't know, $100 million to do. Incredible investment because it made them $20 billion.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
And
price.
I mean, and maybe this is just a stroke of luck. Maybe this is just a coincidence that it happened on the same day, but it did make me wonder, like, is this why they planted a race now for her? The other possibility is that they wanted to give her time before the World Championships in September, because that's a huge event for her. But still, if all of that were true, I still wonder why she didn't race more in May or in June. But I don't know. It's probably easier to say that looking back, but I think that if nothing else, this pre-classic quelled the potential fear that Faith Kipyegon just wasn't quite ready to race. She totally was ready to race. Just, it wasn't, I don't think the tools were there for a sub-4, just not yet.
Be interesting to see what her next race is. It'll be interesting to see if she's able to continue on an upward trajectory. One thing I will say that I think Breaking4 and then this 1500 meter world record has done for the track this summer thus far has been to infuse a level of outside interest and kind of mainstream intrigue that we haven't seen in running perhaps since Breaking2 with Kipchoge. And it's definitely seeing some traction. Like, as an example, I had quite a few people in my life that are outside of the running world or just don't really follow track in particular, don't follow elite running very closely, pinging me about like, what's the deal with this, like Kipyegon? I hear she's running again, like I noticed on my Instagram that there's all this hype around her trying to break a world record. What's she doing? What's the world record? And this got me thinking about, okay, bear with me here. This got me thinking about a concept called Rogers' theory of diffusion of innovation.
This has nothing to do with Mr. Rogers, does it?
No, it's a guy named Everett Rogers who was like a technology theorist and marketer back in the day, in the 1960s, actually. But this is an idea that still is carried through to this day in the marketing world, and in particular in the tech world, which is kind of broke it down into like different kind of influencer types. So you could apply this to like the world of influencing and social media writ large. So at the top of the food chain, there's innovators. So that would be, in our case, like people who have been in on Kipyegon and in on track, like total running nerds like ourselves, I guess. We're the innovators, Alex. This is a compliment to ourselves, or like a condemnation of our sadness. Then there's early adopters. So that would be the people who are like watched Breaking4 live, members of the media who covered it, influencers who were there live and, posting, TikTok and Instagram reels about it, and then podcasters sort of breaking it down afterwards. Then there's the early majority, which would be people who maybe watched the Amazon Prime doc and maybe jumped on and watched the Prefontaine Classic and NBC afterwards. And then what's really important, if you're going to see a huge explosion in interest in a trend develop, is you need to then see what's called the late majority, which is you need to see a huge number of people rushing in to want to get in on the trend or get in on the cool thing. And then it becomes a big deal. And the big question mark now is with Kipyegon's Breaking4, the hype around that and the afterglow of that, and then the 1500 meter world record, where there was some level of outside interest, I think. I haven't seen the numbers. That NBC hasn't released the numbers yet, but it'll be really interesting to see how many people watched that event and how many people actually like tuned in to watch her race at the end of the schedule. But it'd be really interesting to see whether or not we see what's called a late majority and whether or not track sort of trends upwards from here on in. It's a big question mark and really important for the future of track and running as a sport overall, as like an entertainment sport. We'll see.
I feel like for that to happen, you almost need to keep the momentum going inside of that first woman under 4 type of chase that I think we still have a lot to witness and to unpack over what probably will be years. But for now, we still have that last episode of that 3-part documentary to look forward to. So there were it was one pre-race episode. The second episode was the live event with the broadcast and the race itself. And the next one to come will be the wrap up of everything. And I am convinced that the documentary team will end it with Kipyegon triumphing at the pre-classic.
I mean, that's a great way
nice
to
art.
end a docuseries, right? So you're referring to the Amazon Prime docuseries done by the team that did Drive to Survive, the F1 docuseries that has brought F1 to legions of new fans. And that the third part, I think it comes out later on this month, and I would imagine was strategically scheduled so that team could have been with Kipyegon in Eugene to document, sort of like that's the perfect final act, right, in this three act drama. It's interesting that Breaking4, which is I think was supposed to be the kind of pinnacle of the story, with the third part being sort of the afterglow and telling a little bit of the story and kind of like a what's next, turns into kind of the in a weird way the adversity that she needed to get by, or like the great conflict in the drama.
And the redemption.
And there's a redemption arc. Exactly. We should probably do a little bit of old-fashioned reporting and find out for ourselves whether or not the production company was in Eugene for that. Could send a few emails. Anyway, I think we covered this off pretty in a great amount of detail, and looking forward to seeing what Faith Kipyegon does next, and whether or not she's certainly going to race at the World Championships, which is a very different style of racing. So we're not going to probably see any world records there, but it'd be interesting to see if she takes one other or two more stabs at a 1500 or a mile, maybe in July in London, ? TBD.
Yeah.
All right, Alex.
And thank you to Faith Kipyegon for giving us a bunch of stuff to talk about the last couple of weeks of her channel. I hope she keeps racing.